Coming up, Georgia has added another big-time five-star prospect as offensive lineman Cade Mays has chosen the Dawgs for his college home. We'll talk all about it next right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AT&T SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Great to have you with us on our program today. We are busy here for the next hour reacting to everything happening around the SEC from a start of the early signing day or early signing period perspective here. A lot of guys going around the SEC here on this Wednesday. A few SEC names will wait until later in the week to kind of ink their letters of intent. But before we get into what we had planned on talking about, our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10, breaking news here in the last couple of minutes is five-star offensive lineman Cade Mays from Knoxville, Tennessee, a longtime Tennessee commit who had decommitted from the Vols a few weeks ago, has now chosen his college home. He picks Georgia over Clemson here, and a major win for a Georgia program riding a big wave of momentum here today during the beginning of the early signing period.
Yeah, this guy is as well as Jamari Salyer, who we talked about earlier in the day, commits to Georgia earlier today. These are powerful kids. These are game changers. When you talk about offensive linemen for Georgia, Georgia fans are going to love this guy. You look at his arms, you look at his leg drive, you look at how powerful he is in the chest. This is a prototypical Kirby Smart offensive lineman to be able to move people at the point of attack, allow those running backs to get in the line of scrimmage and make their cuts. These are two great offensive linemen for the future.
Robert Jose in the comment section, Mike Johnson, knowing that he's not going to be able to cool my chill down over the course of the next couple of days. And listen, I mean, you see the Georgia G on the sweatshirt. I won't deny that. I mean, there is a lot of conversation out there about what Georgia's doing. A lot of this is excitement for Dog fans who admittedly have probably been waiting a very long time to see the class that Georgia would appear to be putting together at the moment.
Right, and this is a historically good class for Georgia. I mean, let's not discount the fact that Georgia has moved into the upper echelon of recruiting. You talk about what they did last year, you add on the fact of what they do this year, and it's not only the recruiting development part has come along, the success they've had on the field has carried over into the recruiting, and the snowball is rolling right now for Georgia. You're adding some special players. You add in Justin Fields. We're going to talk about all these recruits they're signing as well as everybody else in the SEC, but it really has been a historic day for Georgia in the SEC.
Jeff Hensley kind of, having some fun at the expense of the Tennessee Vols who lose out on Cade Mays here. And, this is something probably worth talking about, that the changeover in coaching staffs hurts Tennessee with Mays, who was a legacy to that program and a Knoxville resident. It doesn't really take the sting away here. I think it's probably fair to say had Jeremy Pruitt had more time to work on Cade Mays, maybe he has a chance to have a different kind of result here. Pruitt's a really good recruiter. He's influencing a lot of, including in-state prospect Alante Taylor. He's going to win some of these battles in-state, but maybe this is an issue where in terms of a timing standpoint, just not enough time to say what needed to be said to Mays after that family had been kind of turned off by the way that really Tennessee just sort of slipped as a program.
Yeah, it slipped as a program, and he's a guy who obviously decommitted the whole Butch Jones saga, everything that's gone on with the head coaching search up there, and I have no doubt that Jeremy Pruitt's going to get Tennessee recruiting pointed in the right direction. He's a great recruiter. He's hiring great recruiters. He knows his way around recruiting in the landscape of the Southeast. Just not enough time, in my opinion. I don't think anybody's going to blame Cade Mays when they look at the two situations with two programs right now. Georgia, obviously, really riding a wave of Kirby Smart heading into the college football playoff. Tennessee still trying to turn over that new leaf. He is a legacy kid. He is from Knoxville, but I don't know if anybody really blames him for jumping down to Georgia and heading to Athens. They're building a special program down there as well. I just think Jeremy Pruitt needs a little bit more time. I think if he can stall some of the decisions today in this early signing period and wait till February, I think these are wins for him.
Of course, Georgia's also waiting the word here from Brenton Cox, along with Alabama. Those two schools going head-to-head for Brenton Cox. That's going to expected to happen here in the next 20 minutes or so. We'll break in live to our show here on AT&T SEC Country Live to give you coverage of that as it happens. I'll remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV, and they'll help you stay connected throughout all of the recruiting season, both here during December and the month of February as well. Great to have AT&T as a part of the program. And speaking of making the switch, a guy who made the switch today is the subject of item number 1 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. That is quarterback Emory Jones, the 4-star prospect from Heard County, Georgia, a longtime Ohio State commit, a guy that had been thought to maybe be a candidate to flip to Alabama. Ultimately, the flip, though, doesn't happen to the Crimson Tide. What happens with the Florida Gators? In fact, earlier today in a broadcast that you saw right here on SEC Country's Facebook page, here is Emory Jones making it official, letting everybody know he plans on going to Florida.
College decision. Well, first of all, I want to thank God for all this. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank the community of Third County for coming out and always supporting me and sticking with me, all my family here, and now I just want to say, for the next 3 to 4 years, I'll spend my college career
See the Florida hat there for Jones and the pyrotechnics, the smoke coming in. Maybe the blue shirt should have been the tip-off that we all needed, that he was going to pull out the matching hat with the Gators there. And I think the win here for Florida is a significant one for a couple of reasons. I think there's obviously the on-field contribution the guy like Emory Jones could make. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the entire country. But I also think Emory Jones gives Florida a bit of a symbolic win here, too. Dan Mullen needs to pull some sort of trophy for his first signing class. His counterpart over at Florida State, Willie Taggart, may not get that kind of opportunity. Florida State's really struggling in recruiting here at the start of this early signing period. They would have liked to have gotten Emory Jones. Not going to happen. Florida does. And what Jones means for the Gators symbolically, I think, is almost as important as what he could mean for them tangibly on the field here for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, and they're putting together a good class. When you talk about some of the names, Kyle Pitts, Amari Burney, Damian Pierce, I mean, they're putting together something that Dan Mullen can work with. You know, keep in mind, it's been a while since he's worked with this kind of talent. I think you add in Emory Jones and you kind of compound it with the loss of what you viewed to be a big loss last week in Matt Corral and the fact that he went after Justin Fields. We didn't think Matt Corral was the guy for a Dan Mullen system. Emory Jones is. Emory Jones kind of plugs right in. I don't know that he starts year one. I think that Dan Mullen tries to find a way to get him in this lineup and begin to develop him as a passer. He does need some development. I mean, this is not, your 5-star typical, plug in and play true freshman, but he is a great player and he's going to do great things for this Florida program. I'm glad it worked out for him and he found a place for himself. I don't think that he ever really fell in love with Ohio State. Committed early, but, obviously began looking elsewhere for a lot of time. So congrats to Dan Mullen. I think this is a big-time recruit for them.
I think that I'm a little different on Matt Corral than you are. While I think that Emory Jones may be a little more of a prototypical Dan Mullen-style quarterback, I think that Matt Corral would have worked out just fine working with Dan Mullen. I think that Corral may have been a better fit potentially than you are, than you did. What I will congratulate Mullen and Florida on, though, is moving quickly on Emory Jones, given whatever happened with Matt Corral, either that there wasn't enough interest on Florida's side or if Matt Corral decided to go to Ole Miss because he wasn't really feeling the love from Dan Mullen. Whatever the story was there, Florida acts quick in bringing in Emory Jones. This is a guy they've been battling for months and months and months. Alabama, Ohio State. It was really down to those two, and then Florida really on the 11th hour. I mean, Emory Jones said himself a few days ago he hadn't really heard from Florida.
Yeah, he did.
So Florida comes in quick here. If we take Emory Jones at his word, I don't have any reason not to. Florida comes in quick here and makes the pitch that's necessary, a pitch that survived, by the way, another official visit the next day to Florida State. A lot of times that last official visit is something that really matters, but the impression that Mullen made on him and made on Trina Jones, his mother, that impression was greater than what Florida State was able to provide there.
Yeah, what was that, a week ago that we had the article that came out? It might have been Chris Kirshner that wrote that article that said, that Emory Jones said, well, I haven't been contacted by Dan Mullen, but I'd be willing to listen to him. All of a sudden, he lands on a flight in Gainesville Friday, goes to Tallahassee over the weekend as well, and he's signing on the dotted line to go to Florida. That escalated quickly in terms of the recruiting world, especially when you think about you have another couple of months until the next signing day comes around. He could have easily taken some time, but obviously he knew where he wanted to go. Dan Mullen gave the right pitch to him, and it worked out for both sides.
Stephen Early says Corral wanted to go to the Rebels to begin with, but Shea Patterson was there. His transfer opened the gate for Corral to come in and start. Everyone wants to be Hurts or Fromm, rookie quarterback slinging the ball and making the playoffs. It's why Jones is headed to Florida instead of Ohio State, and that is true. Ohio State much deeper at the quarterback position moving forward than Florida's going to be, and it is true that we have seen quite a number of freshman quarterbacks play in the SEC here in recent years. Jake Fromm doing it for Georgia here in 2017. 2016 was Jake Bentley. It was Shea Patterson. It was Jacob Eason.
I was going to say Jacob Eason, yeah.
Even go back to 2015, a guy like Drew Lock at Missouri. I mean, we've had several years in a row now of freshman quarterbacks playing in the SEC. I mean, it's only fair to start putting that same kind of attention on Emory Jones and asking, will he be the freshman signal caller for Dan Mullen, the Florida Gators?
Yeah, and I don't see any way that he's not. We've talked about Felipe Franks, and I'm not ready to throw away Felipe Franks' career. I think he's a good quarterback. I think there's a system out there for Felipe Franks. Franks, I just don't know that it's Dan Mullen's system. And unless Dan Mullen is going to change the way he runs an offense, and he very well could. Dan Mullen could say, you know what, I have a plan in place for a guy like Felipe Franks. We can add this kind of spread out, fun and gun type offense, basketball on turf, whatever you want to call it. That could be the case. But I think when you look at Emory Jones, his talents, what you could possibly do in the backfield and recruiting some of the offensive linemen they had in this class, I think they start to get things going downhill, and I would not be shocked to see Emory Jones kind of be that guy to take the snaps, come August next year.
And y'all see the sweatshirt I'm wearing, some of you even today, talking about how big the G is. It gets a little bit bigger every week that I wear it, I think. But I can tell you from the perspective of a Georgia fan, Emory Jones going to Florida, Dawgs don't view that as great news. Now, obviously, Georgia likes its quarterback that it got, Justin Fields. There's no denying that. But Florida scrambling as quickly as they did to get Emory Jones.
Yeah.
That's pretty good work from Dan Mullen and the kind of thing that makes Florida a rival to the Dawgs here. Once again, that cocktail party rivalry in October, it feels renewed here today by the addition of Emory Jones into the Florida signing class.
It really does. And listen, we've talked about it a bunch. Dan Mullen, to me, fits perfectly at Florida. And I think Emory Jones fits perfectly within what Dan Mullen's parameters are for a quarterback. I think he has to have somebody mobile. I think he has to have somebody with a good arm, has somebody with a good head on their shoulders. You just saw him talking on the video. Sounds like a bright kid. Sounds like a smart kid thinking everybody else. So I think he fits in well with what they want to do. And I think that's what makes it such a good signing. If this was just Emory Jones going somewhere else with a different coach, I'd be like, big deal. Another 4-star quarterback signed somewhere. But I think the marriage between him and Dan Mullen is good for both sides.
All right, so you just heard me. I said something good about Florida. But listen to Greg Steele. He's taking a shot. Now, you have to listen. You have to read this closely to realize what a shot this is. He says, Georgia's the new, I think we're Alabama. That's a little bit of a backhanded compliment, right? He's not saying Georgia's the new Alabama. He says Georgia's the new school that thinks it's Alabama.
I don't think he's taking shots at you, though. I mean,
he's taking a shot at Georgia. I just gave Florida a compliment.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody. I think you're alone in the comment section, though, when it comes to giving Florida compliments today from Georgia fans. And Georgia fans are right to do it. I mean, beat your chest all you want to. Today is the day.
Yeah, listen, Georgia fans are going to be impossible to live with. I'm talking about. Listen, I just going to tell you now, on behalf of the entire Dog Nation, I apologize for everything you're about to hear for the next little while here, because Georgia fans are going to be impossible to live with. Dog fans feel very good about what's happening in the world of recruiting. Speaking of that, let's make that the subject of item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We started our show by talking about Cade Mays, who leaves Knoxville to come to Georgia as a 5-star prospect, another 5-star addition to Georgia's class of 2018. The day today really, in some respects, got started with Georgia adding another uncommitted 5-star offensive lineman as Jamari Salyer, the nation's top-rated offensive guard, also chose the Georgia Bulldogs. You saw it today on Dog Nation Daily, my show this morning for DogNation.com. If you missed it, here's Salyer making things official.
Thanks, community. But I'll be continuing my next 4 years of college at the University of Georgia.
So there's Salyer with the hat on, the Georgia D kind of rocking the suit. We had a great commitment video. We may show this to you at some point in time on SEC Country Live presented by AT&T when we have time. He sort of did a mock-up of the old Suge Knight Source Award speech for his commitment video. Really well done. And for a Georgia fan, excited to think about adding those 2 5-star to go along with guys like Trey Hill and Warren Erickson for this offensive line. I know you've seen Salyer on film, and I know you're impressed by what you've seen.
Yeah, the power in his hips. I think that's what's so crazy. When you look at the 5-star compared to the 4-star, you talk about rolling your hips no matter what position you're playing at. And his ability to lock out, his ability to get his hands on people, really keep control of the defense lineman he's blocking, that's what sends him to the next level. I feel the same way about Cade Mays. Cade Mays got that strong upper body, can get the extension with his arms and still keep hold of some of these defenders he's going against. Man, you talk about a tandem. Add in some of the other players they're going to sign. You look at number one by position. Number one down this Georgia signing class. On paper today, it is a very special day for Georgia.
And if you go back to 2016, which was Kirby Smart's first year, one of the things that happens, Georgia only goes 8-5. One of the main reasons why that occurred is Georgia just was not very good along the offensive line.
Yeah.
But for signing day in 2016, leading up to that disappointment in the field, Smart did make his promise that it's long-range recruiting for offensive linemen. It takes a couple of years, but he would bring in some guys for 2017, bring in some guys for 2018. That's exactly what has happened here. Of course, Georgia also making it official with 5-star quarterback Justin Fields. Dog Nation on hand for that as well, to see him wearing the Georgia visor, rocking the suit as well, signing his letter of intent here. And there was some debate about would Fields consider going somewhere else. When Georgia fans see that image right there on the screen of Fields surrounded by Georgia paraphernalia, wearing the Georgia visor, making sure that hair looks just right underneath that. It's obviously a sight for sore eyes for Dog fans to add another 5-star quarterback because here's the thing that non-Georgia fans may not be completely aware of. While Fields is a good player in his own right, he may be responsible for as many as 8 guys who eventually end up in this Georgia 2018 class. Georgia could be number 1 or number 2 in the country before it's all said and done. You don't get that without Fields, not just because of Fields, but because of who Fields brings with him.
I actually think that who Fields brings with him may be even a bigger deal than Justin Fields actually signing with Georgia, because you look at what Georgia's got at quarterback right now in Jake Fromm. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. We're going to have the debate probably all offseason. What do you do with Justin Fields? Do you plug him in next year? Do you find him some playing time? Does Jake Fromm have to move over at some point during his career? So I think the guys that Justin Fields actually brings along with him are a bigger deal today, and for the immediate future in terms of what's going to be put on the field down there in Athens.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So it's going to be an amazing thing to kind of watch this play out in the days ahead. Of course, Georgia not the only program bringing in big-time prospects on a day like this. Auburn also having some success as well. We'll talk about the Auburn Tigers here, item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10. And the quarterback that Auburn's brought in for the class of 2018, Joey Gatewood, a dual-threat guy, a guy that seems to be a pretty good fit for what Gus Malzahn wants to do with his offense. And, well, Gatewood drew some high praise from Gus Malzahn here as well. I want to show you on Twitter what someone captured in terms of a quote from Malzahn. It's Bruce Feldman, the reporter who works for SI now. Apparently, Malzahn, the SEC Network, says Joey Gatewood, closest thing to Cam Newton physically that I've seen. He can run, he can throw, he's a big-time athlete. Is that too high a praise for Gatewood, the quarterback that Auburn brings in for the class 2018?
I always get cracked up about this because I do the same thing. It's like, we look at a guy and go, man, that kind of looks like Cam Newton a little bit. And then it's like, Mike Johnson thinks that he's going to be as good as Cam Newton. It's not always the case. I think that when you look at him and his specific physical skill set, yes, it'll look a lot like Cam Newton, but I don't know that anybody is going to be Cam Newton for the next 10 years or the last 10 years. He's a very special player. But I think you have the upside. When you look at what Gus Malzahn does with quarterbacks with that specific skill set, I think you can get excited about it. Now, we heard the same things about some of the other quarterbacks Auburn has had recently, and it didn't always pan out. But I think that you have a good reason to be excited about this guy. Has all the kind of tangible measurables, and let's see what Gus Malzahn can do with him on the field.
I think this is one of those things, too, where when you're the coach, you have to walk a fine line in terms of how you talk with the players you brought in. Obviously, this is the kind of day where you do throw red meat towards your constituency. Yep. You say what your fans want to hear. Our quarterback's going to be great. All of our signees are going to be terrific. You kind of go on with that. But you also have to be careful that guys like me don't pick up on these quotes and sort of say, hey, this guy compared him to Cam Newton.
Right.
There is a degree to which that is unfair for Joey Gatewood, a player that, may be a bit of a project here, and the kind of quarterback that wasn't the only quarterback by any means that Auburn recruited during the 2018 cycle. To sort of put the Cam Newton label on a guy like that it's not even a given that he'll play quarterback, I think, at the next level. That's maybe a bit unfair.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of him kind of, feeling himself about his own signing class. And I think he should. I think the upside for Joey Gatewood is very high. But how many times this past offseason did we look at Justin Fields and say, man, it looks like Cam Newton out there on film. I mean, he runs like Cam Newton, throws like Cam Newton. So I think the fact that he is going to Auburn, you heap a little bit more praise on him. But I think Auburn's had a pretty good day. I think they've had a good run in the signing class. They're going to have a top 10 signing class. And I think Joey Gatewood is somebody that you can kind of crown in that to be proud of.
I think the Auburn situation also is a little bit interesting here as well, is they seem to be a bit of an outlier in comparison to the rest of the SEC in that, schools like Georgia and Florida seem to be trying to get a lot of work done very early in the early signing period. It runs actually Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Most of the guys that do what I do in the media are treating this today like it's a signing day, and there's a certain extent almost ignoring what's happening Thursday and Friday, but those are also days eligible to sign letters of intent. A lot of the Auburn guys, I think, at least based on what I heard this morning, I haven't followed every twist and turn of this all day long, but based on what I heard this morning, some of the bigger Auburn names like Jalil Irvin and Quindarius Monday and guys like that were expected to sign Friday later in the week instead of Wednesday. Now, I know that Auburn was putting some pressure on those guys to go ahead and get this done so they could sort of count that hay as being in the barn, but Auburn was almost treating the signing day a little bit different than some programs were, or I should say some of the Auburn expected signees were treating the signing period different in that they were going to utilize Thursday and Friday in a way that, Georgia and Florida, they're going to turn the lights off in the coach's office probably on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, and maybe another guy, Justin Ross, I think, is another guy that maybe they're after right now, deciding between Auburn, Clemson, Alabama, from Phoenix City down there in Alabama. It is an interesting dynamic. And we're all kind of learning on the job with this. I don't think anybody knew what exactly to expect when December 20th rolled around. And we mentioned it yesterday on the show. This was kind of, let's get these long commitments out of the way. This wasn't supposed to be a day that people flipped or a day that people decided, and it's just kind of become that. And it's interesting to see how different coaches have really attacked the different dynamic. It's like some people are slow playing, and you mentioned Florida State earlier. Florida State's like 60th in the country right now in recruiting. They're getting beat by like Western Michigan and Tulane right now. So they're hoping to slow play it too. I know there's some Tennessee people that are thinking they'll have a good signing day in February, and obviously Auburn's fallen in a little bit of that category as well, but they still have a top 10 class right now.
We'll let you know that here on AT&T SEC Country Live, in just a couple of minutes, Alabama fans, Georgia fans will be paying close attention because five-star defensive end from Stockbridge, Georgia, Brenton Cox, a one-time Ohio State commitment. By the way, Ohio State's lost a lot of players today.
Yeah, they have.
One-time Ohio State commitment is going to choose between the Dawgs and the Crimson Tide. We'll give you the announcement when it's made. We'll react to it here on our program, so make sure you keep it where you got it right here on AT&T SEC Country Live as we talk about all of that. Of course, AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless Direct TV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Before I move on here to item number 4, one more quick point about waiting till later. LSU, I guess, also playing a bit of a waiting game here as well with Terrace Marshall, the wide receiver, who they hope to bring into their class on Friday. Sounds like they may have to wait until Friday to find out how that Louisiana prospect is going to go.
I definitely think so. And listen, you got to give Ed Orgeron credit too. I think he's kind of rebuilt the dynamic in a lot of ways. I mean, he's opened up pipelines back up in Louisiana. He's kind of gone the JUCO route with a couple of these guys, and Ed Orgeron has understood area of needs for this LSU program, understands where he needs to bring in different players, and I think he's done a great job so far. This is not a blockbuster LSU class by any means, but I think he started to plug in at places that he knows they need to develop players at, and I think that the commitment of him would be huge down the road.
Tyler Mann thinks Marshall is going to end up at LSU. Let me move on to, speaking of big-time additions, Tennessee hopes it got one with its quarterback of the future. We'll make that the subject of item number 4 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Of course, y'all know the story on this. Adrian Martinez, the quarterback who had been committed to Tennessee for a while, flips from the Vols to Nebraska, going to play for Scott Frost there in Lincoln. Tennessee acting quickly to bring in his replacement. I guess there was also the other young man down in Florida that Jeremy Pruitt maybe didn't feel like was the best fit for his offense. Yep. I know that Mike Griffith had a lot of coverage of that at SECCountry.com. But the guy that is apparently going to be a fit for what Jeremy Pruitt wants to do is JT Shrout, who at one point in time had been a Cal commit, but a Cal commit no longer. On Twitter, Shrout making it official. You see right there, pen in hand, contract in front, the letter of intent signed, and JT Shrout says he's officially going to be committed and signed with the University of Tennessee, plans on being a Vol for life. What kind of quarterback do you think Tennessee's getting in Shrout here? And this is an example of, once again, of Pruitt having to make quick work here. Yeah. How well do you think he did in quick work here?
I think he did well. And you mentioned Adrian Martinez obviously heading off to Nebraska. Michael Penix, the quarterback from Florida, you mentioned, I think he's headed to Indiana, I believe. Yeah. And listen, this is very close to being what Emory Jones to Florida was, where it's like last minute, let me get this offer out there, let me recruit you, down in the 24th hour, down at, let's bring this all the way to the deadline, and then he gets in and signs on the line. Decommitted from Cal yesterday, and then all of a sudden signs with Tennessee today, so that did escalate quickly. I think he's a little bit of a project. I don't think this is, we're not in the Justin Fields, Emory Jones category right now, a little bit of a project, but I think he gets a solid guy to add depth to that Tennessee locker room.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I mean, I think in some ways, the Tennessee quarterback situation is almost the exact opposite of Florida's, in that Emory Jones is a better prospect than JT Shrout is, but Florida needs Emory Jones more than Tennessee probably needs Shrout right now. Tennessee's got quarterbacks that can play. I mean, they'll play West Virginia to start the season. They've got a quarterback they can put on the field and play. They can take some time to develop this guy. Jones is a better overall prospect, but Florida needs that to be true, because who would they, play to start the season in 2018? We're a long way from having to answer that question, but as of right now, there is no answer to that question.
Right, and this kind, to me, kind of goes along the lines of a McBride that they ended up playing a little bit last year. And I don't want to say project. I think that feels like a slap in the face to what these quarterbacks are. They're good players, but I don't think these are plug and play year one true freshman starters. I think that you need some time to get these guys in the system, get them bulked up a little bit, get them in the weight room, get them understanding what SEC football is all about. I do find it interesting that all of a sudden, Jeremy Pruitt, it's like, you're looking at Tennessee, let's build around Tennessee, and all of a sudden he goes out to California to get a quarterback commit and brings him on at the last minute. I think that Jeremy Pruitt is really going to start building towards this in the future.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, of course, as you said, bringing a guy like that to run the offense they want to run, I think there's a potential of that making, kind of an interesting impact on the Tennessee Vols. By the way, in the comment section, Jake Hickenbotham a moment ago was also talking about some of the work that LSU had done leading up to signing day. And one of the things that's important to remember when you think about what Ed Orgeron has done here, it's the work that he's done on the transfer trail, kind of before you get to the recruiting day here for 2018. Think about names that we talked about back when it happened. Braden HoCo, who was not eligible for LSU this season, but will be eligible in 2018. A lot of those kind of names that Ed Orgeron did in terms of work during the transfer season, before the recruiting season began, those are names you have to sort of add into the mix of newcomers for LSU in the field in 2018.
I definitely think so. And listen, for HoCo, not only was he a big kind of transfer from Texas Tech coming over to LSU, but he's been busy on Twitter. I know the LSU fans that are watching have kind of seen him on Twitter. He's been reaching out to some of these guys. He's been putting like these pictures out of what they're eating and what they're doing and saying, you know what, why would you go anywhere else other than LSU?
Oh, that's
and
nice.
That's always nice when a guy like that can start to bring some of these recruits along. But I mentioned it, and this is the best thing I can say about Ed Orgeron is he knows the weaknesses on this team. He knows, this roster up and down, and I think he's starting to plug players in, not the splash guys, starting to plug players in that, a top 15 class that you can get a lot of work out for the next 4 years.
All right, let's do item number 5 here in our AT&T SEC Country Live first and 10 list. A big day for Alabama that kind of moves into the top 5 of the major national recruiting rankings based on the players they've added. One of these guys I'm going to pronounce, and one of these guys I'm going to let you pronounce. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
All right, let me start with Christian Barmore here, who was an addition to Alabama's class early here on this Wednesday morning. This is a young man, 4-star defensive lineman out of the state of Pennsylvania, adding Barmore, who put this out on Twitter to let folks know that he was ready to commit and join Alabama's class. I think this is a big-time addition for Alabama, the kind of nice win on a guy. And Barmore is one of those names that I imagine a lot of Alabama fans actually may not even really know that much about, because as a recruit, his profile rose pretty quickly. But I think that when you see the body style, you see the profile, you realize, the toughness that I think he's shown in football fields. You realize kind of how he got to the point where he is now able to be accepted as a commit by Alabama. Tide fans may be doing a little research to find out who he is. But overall, I think Alabama gets a pretty good one here.
They definitely do, and you're so right about that. I don't know if a lot of Alabama people understand some of these commitments because, you mentioned Barmore, he's going to be coming from Philadelphia, and I'm going to mention Eyabi Anoma. I think that's how you say his name, coming from Baltimore, Maryland. And this is the Nick Saban style of recruiting where you go up into Virginia, when you go up into New Jersey and get some of the recruits that they have had recently. I mean, Minka Fitzpatrick, Jonathan Allen, guys up from the Eastern Seaboard. He goes out to California and gets some of these guys recruiting nationwide. So some Alabama fans aren't as familiar with some of these guys. It's not like you're going up to Birmingham and getting 4 or 5 guys anymore. But quality players, incredibly quality players, especially Barmore. When you look at the body of work, he's a prototypical Alabama defensive lineman. 6'5", about 300 pounds, plays with a ton of power, is going to have a ton of leverage, can get into that 2-gap technique that Nick Saban loves up front. And I think he fits in prototypically to what Nick Saban tries to do defensively.
We're also only a couple minutes away from Alabama trying to gain another 5-star prospect. That's Brenton Cox, the one-time Ohio State commit who's going to choose between Georgia and Alabama. That decision is expected to go down here in just a couple of minutes, so we should be able to talk to you about that as it happens here. And when you talk about going to Baltimore and getting a player, which Alabama was able to do today, I think part of the reason why this is able to get done, now most of Alabama's work is going to continue to be done in the South, right? They're going to take their guys from Alabama, going to try to come into Georgia as much as possible. They've had some success in Louisiana, had a little bit of success here from time to time in Florida. That's where they're going to be. That's what they're going to be. What they're going to be doing. But the fact they've been in the college football playoff for the last 3 years, that does give you that ability to go into a state like Maryland and go into some of these kind of places. Go to Hawaii, by the way, and get to a Tonga Vailoa. When you're on major national television every single day like that, every single season, that gives you a big chance to earn that.
It definitely does, and there's been players from up in that area that listen, Nick Saban sent guys to the Pro Bowl, and he mentioned the fact that this is his dream school because of what Nick Saban does with players sending them to the NFL and getting these guys to the next level. I think that's why it's a slam dunk for a couple of these guys.
All right, we have some breaking news coming in here on AT&T SEC Country Live here. The 5-star defensive end, Brenton Cox, has made his decision, and Cox has chosen the Georgia Bulldogs here. So Georgia goes head-to-head with Alabama for Brenton Cox, and Brenton Cox chooses the Georgia Bulldogs, giving Georgia another 5-star commit here today, pulling another name from the uncommitted ranks, and giving Georgia, I think, mathematically a very legitimate shot at the number 1 overall class. Obviously, there'll still be some work to be done for all of the country in February, but leaving December as the nation's #1 recruiting class, adding Brenton Cox and Cade Mays here in the last half hour gives Georgia a real good shot at being able to do that.
I think it definitely does. And listen, you can you talk about all you want to about Georgia and who's on top of the SEC. The fact that this was a guy that Nick Saban wanted. Brenton Cox was a guy that Nick Saban had targeted, really wanted as a player. Kirby Smart's able to get in. And Georgia right now, I mean, it's like a slip and slide downhill. I mean, they are just sliding in the right direction, picking up everything along the way. Brenton Cox fits in perfectly with the theme of which I think this class is built around, making the trenches better, making the front seven better, making that offensive line better. They are really building towards a future when they are going to be able to bully people up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Obviously these guys have to pan out. Obviously they have to develop, but Kirby Smart has done a great job with what he's had. Now all of a sudden you add a ton of talent into the mix, and man, they're going to be tough for the next couple of years.
The numbers here speak for themselves. Georgia adds 3 uncommitted 5-stars today alone to go along with the haul that was already in place here. 3 uncommitted 5-stars joining the class on the same day. An impressive performance here from the Georgia Bulldogs. It's important to say this, and listen, the mainstream media won't know how to cover this correctly, but what Mike said is so true. That last year Georgia signs the nation's #3 class according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Team ranking. But how many of those players, even in a #3 overall class, were guys that Alabama was going hard head-to-head over and Georgia was taking? There were a handful of those guys. Walter Grant, I believe, was one of those guys. D'Angelo Gibbs, I believe, one of those guys. But even for a #3 overall class, Georgia beating out Alabama for star players, there may not have been as much of that kind of stuff going on as some people might think. But with Brenton Cox, you see an example of a player that Alabama would have wanted and Georgia was able to get. And that, to me, says more volumes about what Georgia's doing from a recruiting standpoint than any kind of number does. Any kind of national ranking or any kind of suggestion like that. The fact that now, in a head-to-head situation, Georgia's getting a guy that Alabama wanted. Nick Saban made an in-home visit, or I should say an in-school visit, to Brenton Cox in Stockbridge, Georgia just last week. But the official visit that Cox takes over the course of that weekend to Georgia seems to be what sort of rules the day here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who Nick Saban, like I said yesterday, sat on the couch with during the college football playoff announcement. I mean, he was with Brenton Cox that entire weekend as Georgia was playing the SEC championship game. Obviously, Brenton Cox was watching Georgia thinking, man, I'd love to play there, because he goes back home and picks Georgia, the home school for him. And like I said, I don't in any way want to mix this up. This is a huge win for Georgia. I mean, this is, you can, if you're a Bama person, you can smear this all you want to. You can kind of slant this, but Alabama and Nick Saban wanted Brenton Cox. He was a guy who fits prototypically into what they want to do in the middle of the defensive line, like we were just talking about with Christian Barmore. Now all of a sudden Brenton Cox heads to Georgia, and that just adds to what they're going to have right there in the middle of that line.
Michael Morrow says it's an unbelievable day for Georgia. I don't think unbelievable is too strong of a word here, because I think it speaks to just how quickly this has happened. Obviously, there was some thought that Kirby Smart might be able to upgrade the Georgia recruiting in a way that Mark Richter was a good recruiter in his own right, might have but Smart might be an upgrade over that. But the fact that it's happened with such lightning precision to go from sort of bottom of the top 10 to maybe #1 in the country sort of speaks to the success that he's having there. In the comment section, Chesh Bryan says, does anybody know what time KJ Henry's supposed to announce? Another 5-star defensive end slated to go, I guess a little less than an hour from now. KJ Henry from North Carolina, choosing between Georgia, Alabama, although he did sort of cancel his official visit to Alabama. But I guess Alabama's still a top 5 finalist for Henry, along with Virginia Tech and North Carolina, South Carolina. They're in the mix there for KJ Henry. He'll make his announcement coming up in a little bit. Mark Yawn says the best class in Georgia history. That's probably what Georgia's done here, put best class in history in back-to-back years together.
Yeah, they definitely have. And listen, I'd be shocked if they don't finish #1 this year in recruiting, and they should. When you look at the player, it's what's crazy to me is I'm a guy that's been there, I played, I got recruited, but when I look at rankings, I don't worry about so much, what number class you had. I worry about how big it is for these holes you want to fill and what system you're running. What is Kirby Smart trying to do with these guys? What is he going to plug in? What's he going to do with a guy like Zamir White? These recruits all fit perfectly to me for what Kirby Smart and Georgia are trying to do. They're trying to become physical and tough up front and really be able to lean on their opponents down the stretch. They don't want their opponents to have the ball in the second half. They want to be able to run out of the clock, spend 12-minute drives in the fourth quarter. That's what they're putting together, getting their defense off the field, being able to keep that offense on the field, and that's exactly what Kirby Smart was able to put together today.
So we will talk more about Georgia's acquisition of Brenton Cox, what Georgia's doing on a recruiting standpoint with you in our comment section. We'll continue to do that. Let me do item number 6 here in our AT&T SEC Country Live first and 10 list before that. Florida also doing some big work with the former Tennessee commit, Trey Dean, who at one point in time had been connected to, let me see if I can get all this right, had been connected briefly to Alabama, connected to South Carolina. A lot of people thought he was committing to South Carolina. At one point in time, there were a flood of crystal balls for Trey Dean to Georgia. At one point in time, people thought he was going to Texas. Trey Dean's been all over the place a little bit, but the school that ultimately wins with him was Florida. And here's Trey Dean making that announcement official today that he will be a Gator.
All my friends, I want to thank my high school coaches. I want to thank all the colleges that gave me the opportunity coming out to play the university academically and athletically. Without further ado, I think my talent is to get into Florida. Go get it.
All right, so great get for Florida here, but this is a classic hat science situation. You can look at those hats and you can tell which direction he's going to go here. You've got the bent bill for Georgia, you got the bent bill for Kentucky, you got the sticker still on the other two hats, you get the nice shiny flat bill Florida hat right there, able to be easily reached with his right hand. Nice job on this replay, by the way. He's not putting that dirty Tennessee hat on.
No.
That Kentucky hat he borrowed from his uncle. The Georgia hat and the Alabama hat still have a sticker on them. You've got the Florida hat ready to go. This is a big pickup for Florida, and the hat science works out perfectly like always. I gotta tell you, I'm really feeling that suit there as well. Kind of the air tie, open collar, kind of showing a little gold there with the chain. I think Trey Dean's looking pretty good, and I think that to Florida fans, adding that name to the class of 2018 is also looking really good as well.
Yeah, and if you're a Florida fan, don't let the fact that he was linked to so many other schools kind of water down what he is as a player, because he is a great player. He's going to be a top 250 player in the country. He comes out of obviously Hampton, Georgia, down there in Dutchtown. He's a player that you can build around if you're Dan Mullen too. And we mentioned, how many times have we mentioned the speed for Florida's defense in the last few years? I mean, you can build around that speed from Florida. What Randy Shannon did, what Jeff Collins did, build that speed in the secondary. He adds into that, really that feeling that Florida's never going to run out of DBs. It's like they always kind of plug and play guys that are special players. He adds into that list for me.
Trey Dukes is a Georgia fan in the comment section. He says good pickup for Florida. I think that's the case as well. And I think that you're also right, talking about that heritage of defensive backs that Florida's been able to put together. And, once again, I'm going to say a little bit of like what I said on the Emory Jones thing on the offensive side of the ball for the Gators. You need these symbolic recruits. You need to be able to prove that your brand is going to have a little bit of weight to it. It's going to matter a little bit. And by getting an Emory Jones on the offensive side of the ball, by getting a Trey Dean on the defensive side of the ball, some other names you'll add, I think the Van Jefferson transfer as a wide receiver is a part of this as well. It's easy to sort of conjure up the idea that Florida's kind of doing something here. A lot of teams seem to be kind of lying dormant at the moment. Florida's showing some signs of life, and I don't know how it all adds together on the field in 2018 or even 2019, but in terms of showing a pulse, making a little bit of noise, Florida's definitely causing a bit of a ruckus here.
Yeah, and I know Florida fans, down there in Florida, what they're doing right now is they're looking over at Florida State, and they are claiming a championship right now. I mean, what Florida State has done compared to what Florida is doing right now is, it's not even close. Florida State's not even in the ballpark to what Florida's doing. And no, I don't know that Florida ends up with a top 10 class, but I think they've gotten some key pieces as well. I think Trey Dean starts to add to that as well. I think they begin to rise. And Dan Mullen's a guy who, listen, how many excuses do we make for coaches that have just been put in place, not being able to land, some of the bigger guys like Jeremy Pruitt and some of the other coaches? Dan Mullen's kind of hit the ground running. Now, he's not going to have, like I said, a top 10 class, but he is starting to fill the gap and voids to what he needs next season to be successful.
Jimmy Wallace in the comment section, we're talking about Arkansas and what Chad Morris is going to do. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat this. Morris at Arkansas losing out on Jerry Bohannon was probably a bit of a loss. Bohannon, we talked about yesterday, ends up going to Baylor. You don't get the number one prospect in your state. Maybe just not enough time to truly seal the deal for Morris, who just comes over from SMU. But I do think in terms of, you use the word development a lot, I do think Morris is going to be a developer of talent there in Fayetteville, if nothing else.
Well, I think what works with Chad Morris's system, this is probably why a lot of Arkansas fans were excited about him getting there, is I don't know if you need, Arkansas, obviously, you want all the good recruits you can. You want 5-star guys, 4-star guys. But Chad Morris's system is one of those systems where you can do more with less. You can plug in some of these receivers. You can find a speedy guy to put outside. You can find a running back that you can plug in and play. You can run an offensive scheme where you don't have to always have 5-star guys up front and on the field. And I think that's what makes Chad Morris so exciting for Arkansas fans. When you get that going in Fayetteville, then all of a sudden you'll start rolling downhill and adding recruits later once they see the system you're putting out there.
Candace Edwards, a Tennessee fan, disappointed that Cade Mays has chosen Georgia over Tennessee today. Of course, we'll keep talking about that and more here in AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless Direct TV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Let me move on to item number 7 here. We have been talking a little bit about Georgia. They do add Brenton Cox. They do add Cade Cade Mays, who we just mentioned. We started the show by talking about that. That's been the kind of big reaction here as Georgia makes a move towards the number 1 overall signing class in the country. But as another Georgia fan kind of mentioned a moment ago, now Georgia turns its attention to maybe what might be next. Still needing an elite defensive back, and some of these guys are going to wait here for a while.
Yeah.
So you'll wait till February for Georgia to find out about Isaac Taylor Stewart, who was supposed to take an official visit out from California, got canceled because of weather. Tyson Campbell, who's one of the top defensive backs in the country down in South Florida from American Heritage High School. That's sort of what's next for Georgia in its pursuit of elite talent.
Yeah, and that's what's been so interesting for me, in terms of how these classes start to develop. And I mentioned, to me, it's not always about what the stars are or where you're ranked in terms of classes. It's about getting needs. It's about plugging in players where you're not going to have a ton of players next year. And Georgia's one of those spots, along with Alabama, where you had to have some cornerbacks in this class. You have a lot of seniority and also guys that are going to be headed to the NFL on that defensive side of the ball. So you have to reach in your back pocket to Kirby Smart at some point and start to keep on recruiting these guys. And listen, I know it seems like today has been, and it has been a historic day for Georgia, but you can still really add to this class with some nice pieces come February.
Rod Daly says, Mike, talk about Kirby Smart and negative recruiting against Georgia. Now, we're going to talk about the idea of negative recruiting a little later on the show because there's a pretty high-profile example of that within college football today. But is this something that some Alabama fans are saying, that maybe they feel like that Kirby has done some unfair negative recruiting to Nick Saban as of late?
Negative recruiting to Georgia or Alabama?
Kirby Smart negative recruiting against Nick Saban in Alabama.
Not that I've heard of. And listen, that may be the case. And I don't fault some of these coaches for going in there. And listen, Jeremy Pruitt can be targeted for that as well. You talk about J.J. Peterson, you talk about Jacob Copeland, the fact that he's tried to get those guys. And it's going to happen. You're going to have guys that are going to be honest with the recruits about how they feel about different situations. If you ask, who's going to be at their location longer, who's going to be the head coach at Georgia or Alabama longer, it's going to be Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's going to be at Georgia for 15 or 20 years developing that program. I don't know that Nick Saban's got that left in the bag. He's 66, going on 67, so he's not going to be there 10, 15
We
years.
did see, though, at least some rumors of some negative recruiting against Kirby Smart. Kirby and Georgia deal with a couple player arrests, and some of that was kind of used against some, at least according to what's on the internet, was used against some Georgia potential recruits on the signing trail. So you see some of that kind of stuff going back and forth. In the comment section, somebody said also, hey, let's talk about the Tennessee Vols. We'll do that coming up with item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list in just a moment. Before that, let me talk about a big day for the Ole Miss Rebels here as well, who, already having added Matt Corral, the quarterback commit. He signs, becomes official today. They also get a wide receiver, Elijah Moore, to flip from Georgia to Ole Miss. A nice pairing there between Moore and Corral, the future quarterback. They flip a player from Mississippi State today as well. I got to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of the Luke hire for Ole Miss, but I think that Ole Miss has added more players to this recruiting process than you would probably give them a chance to.
You got to give them their due, right? A lot of questions were asked of Matt Luke, and maybe he's just a layup hire. Maybe he's the easy guy to go with. He has gotten down to the nitty-gritty, and he's taken the gloves off, and he's dug in, and he's found some recruits. He's been able to flip some guys. This is an Ole Miss program who's recruiting on sanctions right now. They're on a bowl ban. This is a team that really isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and yet are able to get the pieces in place to start building. And I mentioned it yesterday. Matt Corral, to me, signals the light at the end of the tunnel for Ole Miss. I think that light got a little brighter today. I think that getting some of these pieces in place and being able to flip these position players that you feel like can come in and make an immediate impact for Ole Miss. Listen, you're losing. You lose Shea Patterson to Michigan. You plug in a guy like Matt Corral right away. You lose Van Jefferson to Florida. You find some other recruits to start plugging in. I think Matt Luke deserves a ton of credit for what he did today.
Yeah, listen. I think that players are proof. You can sell your vision for the future as long as you've got players coming in. If you don't have that, then you really don't have anything to sell. So from that standpoint, I think that the Luke years at Ole Miss are getting started better than the Moorhead years are at Mississippi State. Because when it is all said and done, is Mississippi State going to be able to match any kind of talent the way that Ole Miss is bringing in? From the looks of things right now, I think Ole Miss is definitely getting the better of the Bulldogs there in the Magnolia State.
I think that's definitely probably true. And listen, I don't want to put Mississippi State's class aside at all. They're going to have a top 25 class as well, maybe even a top 20 class once it's all said and done. They've got some quality players from their backyard as well. They've been able to kind of lock down on some of these guys in the state of Mississippi. So I don't want to just push them to the side. But I think the fact that, listen, Matt Luke was an interim coach. He just got the head coaching job. They've been on sanctions. They've been hit with scholarship restrictions, bowl bans. I think that he's even in the ballpark with Mississippi State right now. Says a lot about what he's brought to that program and the passion and the love he has for Ole Miss as an Ole Miss guy. And that's where you and I kind of split ways in terms of what Matt Luke was. Yeah. I think more than anything, he loves Ole Miss, and he can sell the fact that he loves Ole Miss because he's been in a lot of these guys' shoes.
Yeah, listen, I think the problem for me with Luke is always going to be, if you're trying to sell me on something intangible more than tangible because he's an Ole Miss guy, he's going to like the program more, and somehow that's going to lead him to have more success. I'm always going to kind of push back on that. I think that success in football is sort of produced more by tangible means than intangible means, and making a decision on the basis of one game, I think, can be a scary proposition. That may have been what Ole Miss did in hiring Matt Luke after the Egg Bowl. I mean, we know that Dave Doran thought he was getting that job. Ultimately, it doesn't quite work out that way. But the proof is in the pudding, and getting an Elijah Moore, getting a Matt Corral is certainly proof for Matt Luke right now.
Yeah, it definitely is. And Elijah Moore is one of those guys who I think he immediately becomes a difference maker for this team. When you look at what Jordan Ta'amu has done last year and being able to plug them in right away and find these playmakers out wide, because Ole Miss right now, they have some talent up on the offensive line, but they're not one of those teams that's going to run right at you right now. They're going to be throwing the ball. They're going to air it out. Shea Patterson's numbers were insane. Jordan Ta'amu's numbers were insane. So you can plug a guy like Elijah Moore in right now. He's going to get his stats, and he's going to spend a good 3 or 4 years racking those up.
Van Bird says, despite the high-profile name, Mississippi State probably still has a better class than Ole Miss, and probably will when it's all said and done. So Van Bird's a Georgia fan, but he weighs in there on the Mississippi State side of things to talk about what they're able to do. Let's move on to item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And for Tennessee and Jeremy Pruitt, the situation here is sort of well established of what they were dealing with. Short window to kind of bring in players. That was always going to be a real challenge, but I thought that Tennessee at least did what it had to do with a couple in-state guys today, kind of going to the same school there, Cordova High School there in Tennessee, and bringing in offensive lineman Jerome Corvin, the 3-star running back Jeremy Banks. These are not names that are going to sort of like leap off the page and get everybody talking around the SEC, but when you're trying to build the best class you possibly can, going to the same school and getting a win, sort of the same signing day ceremony with a couple pretty good players, this is a pretty good addition for Jeremy Pruitt.
It definitely is, and I know what Tennessee fans are looking at today, and they're looking at what Cade Mays did and some of their other targets here recently. You're excited about the quarterback he just got out of California. I don't think Jeremy Pruitt's done yet, though. I think this is really a guy who said, you know what, I've been at Alabama, I've been having to be down in bowl prep and do all these things. I think he's getting ready to make a February run, and he's already changed the dynamic of Tennessee recruiting a ton. And we mentioned it last week. He goes down into South Alabama and some of the other states in the Southeast and offers a ton of people.
Yeah.
I mean, he goes out there and says, listen, we're going to jump on you now. These 9th graders, these 10th graders, we're going to jump on you now and see if we can get you in this Tennessee program. So I don't want Tennessee fans to look at it and say, oh, we're kind of let down what Jeremy Pruitt's doing. I don't think he's even gotten started yet. I don't think he's been allowed to really get to the grinder and do Jeremy Pruitt's ways of recruiting. I think you'll start to see that in February, but I think 2019's recruiting class to me will spell what Jeremy Pruitt is.
Yeah, I think the thing you got to do if you're a Tennessee fan, I think some Vols fans showed some patience with Jeremy Pruitt with Butch Jones, almost longer than they should for reasons that didn't seem to have a lot of evidence behind them. I thought that Butch Jones was sort of giving a lot of double talk and maybe a lack of passion, overall energy, and somehow, some way, Jones' bosses were sort of tolerant of that. I think if they could extend that same brand of patience to Jeremy Pruitt here for a couple of years, they may eventually see some fruit come to bear here, because he's going to learn more about how to be a head coach, and he's going to bring in more players, and it does take time. And a lot of what Pruitt's known for are these early offers, sort of blanketing talent-rich areas with early offers. And when these guys have become of age, you can say, hey, I was in on you first.
Right.
I was the first guy to give you your major offer. The same way that worked with Dan Mullen and Emory Jones, you can work with Jeremy Pruitt in sort of a next generation of 2020 or 2021 recruits. But there could be some lumps on the field between now and then.
Yeah.
But Pruitt may be a good enough recruiter to be worth some patience for Tennessee fans. As much as Vols fans don't want to hear that, no SEC fan base likes the idea of having to be patient for more than 1 year. But if you can give Pruitt 2 years, at that point in time, you may see the talent level on this roster start to raise.
Well, I think Jerome Carvin and Jeremy Banks are perfect examples of what I'm trying to say. You offer these guys in these cities. Say you're going into Atlanta and you offer 5 or 6 guys, maybe a couple on the same team. Guess what? All of a sudden, they're in the car together riding to Knoxville on Saturdays. All of a sudden, they're communicating about what Tennessee's telling them, or how they project at the next level. Maybe they want to play together. And we mentioned earlier in the show that's become a big deal. What guys wanting to play together and go to college together has become a bigger and bigger deal. They did get guys like Greg Emerson, Brent Lawless. I mean, they have some pieces in this class that you can be proud of if you're Tennessee. But I think when you look at the fact that they're probably outside the top 30 right now in recruiting classes, not a lot to be proud of. I'm just telling you, though, wait till February and wait till Jeremy Pruitt gets it rolling.
Brandon Dalton says Jeremy Pruitt's trying to build a foundation. I believe that's true. I believe that can happen. But I am not going to blow smoke here. I don't think they can do it this February. I just don't. I think the recruiting is based on relationships. And the notion of like Dan Mullen swoops in at the 11th hour and brings in Emory Jones, that is for the most part the absolute outlier. Most of this stuff comes on the basis of relationships. And I said this yesterday, and I mean this. Tennessee's probably going to end up finishing second for a lot of guys. And there is no silver medal in recruiting. That's going to be irritating to Vols fans. They may finish second for Jacob Copeland, the receiver from Pensacola. They may finish second for J.J. Peterson, the linebacker from down in Colquitt County in Georgia. They may finish second for a lot of big-name guys. And that shows you the work that Pruitt is able to do, but you're not going to have a whole lot tangible to show for it, at least for the 2018 class, I believe.
Right, and I'm glad you bring up J.J. Peterson, too, because that's a guy that Alabama wants. And obviously he feels a ton of allegiance to Jeremy Pruitt, and he's mentioned that Tennessee's probably his leader right now because of the relationship he has with Jeremy Pruitt. I think that to me, is going to tell me a lot about what Jeremy Pruitt's going to do. If he's able to ink J.J. Peterson, maybe bring Jacob Copeland along with it, then all of a sudden, I think in February, you're a Tennessee fan, you're going, okay, we really have something here. You know, Jeremy Pruitt's able to flip a couple of these guys that Alabama wanted or these other big schools around the Southeast. If he can just get these guys to hold on, and this early signing period comes and everybody says, you know, this is that and this is that, get these guys to hold on, just a couple of guys to hold on until February. And I'm telling you, I think that even if he does come in second for some of them, I think just getting them to hold on to me is a win for Jeremy Pruitt.
AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Of course, it's good to have you with us here today on the show as well. For item number 10, I want to go outside the SEC just for a moment, but I do think it's relevant for a lot of our audience because, A, these are two big-name coaches that SEC fans know and care about and do a lot of battling head-to-head in recruiting, and B, this is kind of a juicy storyline here. Let me show you a tweet here from someone quoting Dabo Swinney, the Clemson coach. This is Ari Wasserman on Twitter saying that Dabo Swinney told Jackson Garman that's a big recruiting win for Clemson over Ohio State today during his recruitment, that Urban Meyer is on the back end of his career in terms of years left. Carmen says it wasn't a major factor, but it was an underlying one in why he chose Clemson over Ohio State. To me, this feels like all is fair in love and recruiting. You know, Dabo Swinney's got the nice guy image. Behind the scenes, I don't think you win with players by being overly nice. I think you win with players by being overly competitive. To me, this feels like Dabo trying to be competitive. This feels like the kind of thing that goes on the SEC all the time. I'm not scandalized by this. This is being treated by some as sort of dirty pool by Dabo against Urban Meyer, who most of our audience, no matter who you root for, doesn't really like. How do you feel about what Dabo says about Urban Meyer here and the way it was used to get a player?
I'm not as down on it as other people seem to be either. And listen, negative recruiting to me, I don't know if we should even call it that. To me, it's, and if Dabo was talking about how he feels about Urban Meyer, how he feels about another program, I call it just being honest. And listen, it happens to Alabama all the time. It's going to start happening to Georgia a lot more with the class they're getting. I think that, listen, Dabo didn't shy away from this. He just said, you know, sometimes recruits want to talk about certain things, and I want to talk to them about what they want to talk about. So maybe there was a question there. Maybe it was a question of how long are you going to be at Clemson? Maybe, you know, how long are some of these other coaches going to be around? And I think he tried to answer it as honestly as he could. So I'm not really scandalized by it either. I think it's going to happen, and I think honesty in a lot of ways is the best policy. Listen, these coaches spend the entire recruiting process lying to the players anyway, so why not come out with some honesty?
Cliff Nelson says that recruiting is a cutthroat business, y'all. And Cliff, I think to a certain degree that's right. And we may not be always, at times, maybe a little turned off by that, but the truth is, it is what it is. Getting players is the name of the game. And by the way, you know, in most of these cases, what is going to be used as negative recruiting is at least to some degree kind of true. I mean, saying, hey, who knows how long Urban Meyer's going to be at Ohio State? He's got a track record in place that would lead you to believe that's a possibility. He did kind of leave Florida high and dry after the 2010 season. That is in his sort of backstory here, a part of his story. Dabo Swinney is simply showing the receipts for what we've all seen happen in the past. That to me seems fair. Now, if you're making up some sort of lie, if you're just sort of pulling something out of thin air, that may be a little different. But in this case, asking questions about Urban Meyer's future based on his past behavior, that does not seem like a stretch to me.
Yeah, I don't think it's out of bounds. And honestly, and this is just me personally talking, I've never looked at Urban Meyer and thought he's going to go the Bobby Bowden route or the Joe Paterno route or the Bill Snyder route or, you know, some of these coaches that retire on the job. Bear Bryant was one of those guys that, you know, the guys that coach into their 80s almost. Urban Meyer has never struck me as that guy. He's got kids. He's, you know, soon to have grandkids, I guess. He's a guy to me who's going to get to a certain point financially that he feels comfortable, leave Ohio State in a good spot, and he's going to say, you know what? I want to retire. I want to go to a lake house or live on the beach, and I want to do these things later on in my life. I don't want to coach till I'm 80. That's how Urban Meyer has always struck me, at least.
All right, let me do our AT&T look ahead here. We're obviously paying attention to what's happening with the college football bowl games. Last night, by the way, did you watch any of Lane Kiffin last night?
I did. I did, and I'm going to tell you right now, I was impressed.
Yeah.
I was impressed. There was a little piece of me as an Alabama guy that looked at what he was doing offensively, and I thought, man, he's really good at what he does.
I think he's having a good time down there at Florida Atlantic.
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. He's having
pretty good money, zero pressure, zero oversight of his personal life, which
signed a 10-year extension yesterday.
Yeah, I don't think he's staying there for 10 years, but I think he's having a good time there for right now. Another bowl game tonight. I don't know that this one's going to be quite as entertaining. It's the Frisco Bowl. I like to ask you a trivia question from time to time. Do you know where the Frisco Bowl is being played?
Is that Frisco, Texas?
That's right. It's Frisco, Texas.
Let's go.
Frisco Bowl's in Frisco, Texas. Yeah, I like to sort of spring these trivia questions.
Is that a high school stadium they play at? What stadium is that in Frisco, Texas?
Now you've turned the tables.
Yeah.
I think zero idea.
Isn't that like $70 million high school stadium?
I might be way wrong. I have zero idea. I also have no idea what Louisiana Tech or SMU's bringing to the table. I guess SMU's playing the interim coach here.
Yeah, they definitely are. And I don't really know what to expect of this game either. I think when you look at the game, maybe a ton of points scored, but maybe both teams lay an egg.
Jeff I'm not really Driscoll still at Louisiana Tech? That can't be true, right?
No way.
Yeah.
Driscoll was playing last night or his brother or whatever playing for Lane Kiffin last night.
There you go. See, it all comes full circle. All right, so one of the things we've been doing here on AT&T SEC Country Live in the last few days is showing you these examples of how SEC sort of veering into the Christmas territory with the Christmas lights, and give you a couple examples from stadiums. But one Alabama fan takes it another step further than that. Not only is the house completely adorned in Christmas lights, the lights are timed to be in sync with the Alabama fight song. Kind of a perfect combination of two of my favorite things, college football and Christmas. Take a look at this. This is the preamble to the fight song. It's pretty amazing. First of all, I do love fight songs. I think I
love that one for sure.
Are super catchy. I think Alabama's got a pretty good fight song, and seeing the Christmas lights synced up to it, I got to tell you, I like that.
It's pretty good. I've definitely sang that fight song quite a few times in college, and it's obviously one of my favorites. So.
You do a bunch of decorations. You're a decorator. I
want to be. I live in an apartment now. But when I had my house, I had it pretty done up pretty well. I do want to mention now because Cliff Nelson mentioned in the comment section, 4-star cornerback Anthony Cook actually committed to Texas. It was a huge LSU target. Kind of a letdown for LSU right now.
Disappointing there for Ed Orgeron, but they'll certainly be here to battle a lot more. All right, we're back tomorrow. There'll be a lot more that unfolds here later on in the afternoon and the evening. We'll cover it all tomorrow at 3 p.m. We'll try to catch our breath. It has been a busy day here on SEC Country, but we've certainly been excited to be able to bring it all to you. And thanks for being with us here for our show. If you want to hear the podcast, it'll be up for you on iTunes and SoundCloud. Share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC, including here on the early signing period. It's all here for you, and we'll see you tomorrow right here once again on AT&T SEC Country Live.